Hey guys, welcome to The Grey Escape. I'm Natalie Gray, and you are forewarned, as the title of the episode conveys. This is the ultimate hardcore writer's episode. So if your heart is set on a career writing for TV, and the mere mention of Red Dwarf or Doctor Who makes you go weak at the knees, this one's for you. In fact, this episode is so epic, I decided to split it into two. I'll tell you more right after this. Communication can be done in many ways. Facial expressions, physical actions, shouting, but none is more written about, documented, debated, and dissected than the art of writing. In our modern era, writing is an essential tool to craft everything from that perfect email to just the right profile on Match.com. Because of my own involvement in the world of comedy, many of my guests on The Grey Escape have had talent and expertise in this skill. They have backgrounds in improvisation, acting, and stand-up comedy, and all of them have in common an innate passion for comedy. My guest today is no different. Andrew Ellard has worked on iconic British TV comedies like The IT Crowd, written, created, and directed by the brilliant Graham Linehan, the cult classic Red Dwarf, written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, and he is currently helping to craft a brand new hit on the UK's small screen called Chewing Gum. And the horror thriller screenplay he wrote called After Death has just been produced. My point is, this guy knows writing. I went to his home just outside London, and to describe the scene for you guys, Andrew has something beyond a DVD collection. I would say it's more like a structure, an entity of DVDs that allows human inhabitants. So join me now as we step into the police call box and emerge in the home of writer and script editor Andrew Ellard for part one of the Grey Escape's ultimate hardcore writer's episode. I've got these fabulous mics and then these sort of shitty mic stands.
You know what, though? I will take that. I've so many bloody podcasts where they record them on their iPad, and the iPad actually has a very decent microphone in it, but they never put it in the right place, or... So many podcasts I get off-put just by the quality of the thing.
You mean they record it into an iPad without actual microphone?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, actually, they've got, you know, the iDevices have decent mics on them relatively, but you've got to be using them very deliberately and point. You know, you got to aim it right, and I don't know. It feels like you you can spend £100 on a microphone and then you're better off. You
can feel really confident that I spent more than £100 on these microphones.
Yeah.
I have to just initially comment because after frantically setting up your backdrop.
I know.
Do you even know how many DVDs there?
No, I don't. Although, you know what? I've got this. I've got an app where you scan the barcode of every new DVD you've bought. So I have on the computer an actual catalogue of literally everything I own. I know it's a stupidly huge collection of DVDs.
Wow.
I do know. I'm an obsessive.
Is the word nerd a compliment?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can't. God, in coming from where I come from, coming from Red Dwarf and the IT Crowd, it would be horrible to think that was an insult.
Are these DVDs, I'm curious, how have you organised them? Are they alphabetical?
Oh, yeah. No, you know what? We had a big reshuffle because originally all the movies were by release studio. So all the Universal was together and all the Paramount and all the Sony, and which works as long as you can remember who released what movie. And when I had a few shelves of them, that was fine. But at this point, it's literally impossible. So no, I've had to go alphabetical for the movies. And then... So then TV, sci-fi, drama and stuff is there. And then sitcoms and comedies, animated comedies down there. This is all sitcoms. British TV drama is all up across there. And then behind you is literally every episode of Doctor Who that's available.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel like you could rent out your living room
yeah.
to fans to just come and peruse.
You know what the worst thing is it's made me so pathetically selfish because you can't keep track of it. It's so hard to keep track of it. So I used to lend people DVDs and then you wouldn't get them back for a year because people are people. And after a while you go, I thought I owned that. Oh, maybe I don't. You forget that you even had it in the first place rather than that somebody else has got it.
And how do you feel now that DVDs are sort of no more?
You know what? I used to tweet quite resentfully that Blu-ray even exists because for me it feels like a stopgap technology. I'm happy to go... I got into CDs really late because I was like, well, I don't need to change from tape. Don't need to change from tape. You can tell I'm not a big music fan. But when I made the move from CD to download, I was completely happy with that. I love that there's a little box the size of a cigarette carton that has literally all of my music in completely. I adore my iPod. In fact, the iPod Classic is already going out of... I don't think they're selling that anymore. And it breaks my heart because that's the little box I take everywhere and listen to music on. We have it on in the car. We have it on in every room in the house. I plug it into whatever stereo's in that room. So the move to Blu-ray, I was like, oh, can we not just skip this and go straight to another box that all my films are on? Because I'd love all of this. It looks nice, but it takes up a monumental amount of space. And you have to plan your shelving. So if I could just get a nice hard drive with everything on and also a cloud backup, I'd be completely happy. And instead we're doing this Blu-ray thing instead. And I'm buying Blu-rays now. I didn't used to think there was a big difference, and then I got new glasses. I was like, there's not that much difference between upscale DVD and Blu-ray, and then I got my eyes checked and got a new pair of glasses. And...
Your glasses look like my glasses. Did you get them from Boots?
Oh no, these are
fancy ones?
I can't even remember. These are memory metal though. I'm completely obsessed because they bend. The metal on them bends. Oh, and it's so much. But you know how the screw falls out of the hinge in the corner of your glasses at the worst moment, and then somebody has to lend you sellotape for the rest of the evening, and none of that. Because there is no screw. It's completely attached to the lens of the glasses and it's just memory metal. It takes a little while for them to heat it up and adjust it, but they're gorgeous. I love. So this is like my third pair of memory metal glasses in the last 15 years.
I'm so going to make sure there's a photo, a very close-up picture of you in your memory metal glasses for people to see these.
They're gorgeous.
Glasses.
I love them.
Well, this week it was a big deal with the whole Back to the Future commemorative date. So let's just go back from your future. How did this all start? I mean, what kind of kid were you?
What kind of kid was? I was picked on. No, I was primary school. I had kind of a great time because for some reason I just cottoned onto things just a little bit quicker. Okay. I think Mum had put us through. Me and my sister both went through what was then called 4+. Which was the year before you started school. You could be taken to a local teacher in the neighbourhood who would teach you spelling and writing before you even went to school. So my first year in primary school, I was ahead of everybody. I knew the alphabet already. And even by my last year in primary school, kids used to get maths problems, and they would math problems. You can tell I've got an American wife. Maths problems. They would bring them to me rather than bring them to the teacher because I'd explain it quicker. So I felt like a king. I felt fabulous. I was so useful to people. And then I turned 12, went to secondary school, and the last thing you want to be is the kid in the room who thinks he's smarter than everyone else. And it took me about a year to learn that, a year of getting my ass kicked before I realised, oh no, don't be smart at school. Kids don't like that. So I loved primary school, hated secondary school, loathed it, miserable time in my life. Then I did my A-levels somewhere else, and I had the best time in my life again. Fantastic. The best friends that I think maybe I've ever made at that point, at least one of whom is still just like one of my closest friends. And that's where I figured out loads of stuff. I originally wanted to be a writer of some kind or a cartoonist. It was A-levels that made me realise I've got no artistic talent at all. I like cartoons, but I can't really draw. And I can write, but my writing was quite cinematic and televisual. And it wasn't until A-levels that I did media studies because a friend of mine was doing it and I had a gap to fill. And it was like, oh, this is a thing? Understanding films, TV shows, adverts, newspaper headlines, this is a thing? And suddenly a whole thing just dropped into place. And so I did a film studies GCSE just for fun, just to fill the time up. And then my degrees are film and masters in independent film and filmmaking. But really, it was just 4 years of going to university and writing bad screenplays until they turned out to be not quite bad by the end of 4 years.
And so speaking of screenplays, I watched your movie last night.
Oh, God bless you.
Yeah, which I have to say I really enjoyed. I thought it was very good. I streamed it on Virgin Movies, and I think they have a ways to go before they get Netflixy. Because it kept popping up other stuff.
No.
No. And I, in the end, I had to be so resourceful, and I can't even take credit for this idea. So I've got my computer plugged into a nice big TV via HDMI cable, full screen on the computer. But what it was doing, it kept flashing inserts of a non-full screen screenshot.
I'll talk about being stuck in hell.
It was a little like a time loop. So in the end, I had to stick to the small screen and zoom in.
Oh, that's preposterous.
So talk about technology and having to go backwards. But your film was very, very good. So you've done the thing that is so, I mean, you've got the Holy Grail. You wrote the script, you sold it, and the film got made. So is this your first one?
It's the first screenplay I've had made. A few years ago, I got hired to do a closed room horror movie, a kind of two-hander horror movie, thriller thing for a couple of guys who'd advertised on Mandy.com, which is one of those places where you go and find screenwriters.
Okay.
And they had a little bit of money and a concept, and so I wrote them the movie. And that never got anywhere. They kept trying to resell it and but they kind of stumbled and struggled. But it made me. It was great practice, if nothing else, and paid to practice, which is amazing. To try and do a thriller with only two characters in a locked room for most of the runtime.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of solutions, and I enjoyed the creative challenge of it. So a few years later, I wrote Future Inc., which is a sci-fi short film that me and a director called Martin Sterling did for the Sci-Fi London 48-Hour Film Challenge. Great opportunity to do something because they give you a title, a concept, something to include, blah, blah, just to prove that you've made it that weekend on a Friday lunchtime, and by Sunday lunchtime, you have to have delivered the finished 5-minute short. And we did this one, Future Inc., and it not only won the competition, but it got me, a lot of people got in touch just kind of to talk about me as a writer because of it, because it was most shorts often showcase directorial ability, and it absolutely did that. Martin's got such a great knack and an eye, but it also had a proper story and a character that you gave a damn about by the end of 5 minutes, which is a nice little challenge. So one of the people that got in touch was Jez Menninger, who is the co-director and producer on After Death. And actually he'd got a comedy project that he wanted me to give him notes on. And I gave him the notes on that. And he said, right, okay, and now I've got this other thing, though. We're going to have to do... We wanted to shoot our comedy first, but it turned out to be really expensive. So we need to do something lower budget, cabin in the woodsy, 5 people, blah, blah, blah. I've written a story outline, but before I go to screenplay, would you take a look at that too? So he hired me for notes on that. I gave him the notes, and I said, listen... It's such a great idea. It's a really good central idea, and you've got a couple of great little bits. But honestly, these character journeys don't work for me. The story beats, the characters don't find out they're dead until like halfway through, and the entire audience will be sat there going, "I think you're probably dead."
Yeah. We all saw Sixth Sense.
Yeah, audiences wait for the other shoe to drop, and I think that's hard to fight against. So you have to assume that they. Number one, assume the audience is smarter than you because they've got more brains between them apart from anything else to do. So I pitched him, I sent him some notes on how to rewrite it, but I did kind of slip in a thing at the end of like, I mean, or I could have a crack at writing this for you, maybe. So we had a meeting, and thank God he went, I'd love to not be writing this so that someone else can do it, so that I can concentrate on the directing and the producing of it. So they hired me. So it wasn't a spec of mine that I sold. It was one that I was commissioned to write. And I went back to first principles. I took kind of all the core central premise of the whole thing was this cabin. And in fact, they even had the location.
So say, what is the core premise?
The core premise is 5 people wake up dead in an afterlife. And in the original premise, it was a kind of purgatory, figure it out before you escape. Either you're going to go to hell or the other thing, if you can figure it out and get forgiveness in time. And those themes didn't seem particularly exciting to me because I felt like I'd seen it. I felt like I'd heard it a lot. But I quite like this idea of arriving somewhere, knowing you're dead, and going, now what do we do? Like, that seemed an exciting narrative question. So I went back to absolutely first base principles and like, what characters would I want to put in here, and what would be the interesting story beats? And you start scribbling ideas all over everywhere, and bit by bit, this thing starts to emerge of... What if the rules are really tough on people? What if everybody's right? What if sin is sin no matter what? What if every black mark against your name is a black mark against your name for good, for permanent? because it never made any sense to me that you could do the most egregious thing and then go and talk to a priest for 20 minutes and he'd say, no, all right, we've dealt with that now. You've dealt with that now? That always seemed like human self-serving. That always seemed like a human solution to a metaphysical problem. Now, I don't have any particular faith, but if I believed there was a God, I think I would also believe that he probably didn't care whether a priest and a load of people who came up with a load of rules long after the establishment of a particular faith came up with ways to absolve people, came up with plans. It feels like us. It's at the core of all this, actually, is a problem I have with. I struggle with Christianity just because it's the country I'm from and that's the predominant religion. I struggle with Christianity because I struggle with anyone who obeys the Bible literally word for word all the time, partly because it's contradictory as a thing anyway, because it's got umpteen authors, but mostly because you've kind of chosen to absolve yourself of thinking. Here is the catalogue of rules I have decided to follow. It's like people don't follow the instructions when they buy a cabinet and self-assemble it, you know? Right. The idea that you could get this book that would tell you. So I don't have a lot of respect for, I literally follow every word of this, because that suggests to me you've stopped thinking. But also, I don't have any respect for anybody who gets hold of the book and then picks which bits they want to follow, because, well, who says that?
I like this bit about catching fish.
Right, yeah. Isn't there something kind of arrogant about the idea that, no, the book's right, but only in the bits that I personally think is right. What's definitely right is the not eating certain foods at a certain time, and what's definitely wrong is being, against homosexuality or something. The idea that you can pick and choose from that book seems as bizarre and arbitrary and self-centered to me as that. I'm not against a kind of spirituality. I think that can be really useful. And whatever gets you through the day, if you want to believe something that gets you through the day, it's only when religion gets imposed on other people that I get angry. My problem is that actually, when you reverse all the way out of it, if you say there is a God, then he is inflicting his religion on literally everyone. And I don't have respect for that. So this movie's kind of, in part, about all of those things. It's frustrated at man-made solutions to an absolution, but also about the idea of a judgmental being imposing upon the way we as people judge other people, the way a God judges us. It annoys me, and so a lot of the movie is about being pissed off about that. Which I didn't really know when I was writing. I didn't sit down planning to write a polemic or anything. And it isn't one, really. It's a thriller with some nice subtext to it. But I didn't know I was putting subtext in there. I thought I was solving a logistical problem. Well, they're trapped in the room, so I can't go out of the house very often. Just budgetarily, we could never afford it. So we've got to focus on characters, and that means reveals, and that means the reveals have to mean something. And, well, if we're talking about an afterlife... And in the middle of it all... I fell in love with this idea, slight spoilers for the movie, but I fell in love with this idea that if we're all going to hell, if we're all damned, if it's as simple as, no, look, you can't possibly not sin. Humans are built to do it. Evolution makes us go after the things we go after. It's not that you shouldn't fight against certain instincts like that, but for sure, and I put this in the movie, when a baby cries, it says, I don't care what you're doing, I'm hungry. That's a lack of compassion straight away. It's a lack of consideration for other people. It's a baby. It doesn't know any better, but it's held to a standard where that's selfishness, So everybody's fucked.
I mean, babies are really selfish.
Babies are fundamentally selfish. So the idea that would be happening, and then the parallel idea that somebody might want to help you change that there might be an entity somewhere that looked at this from outside and went, hang on, this isn't fair, and tried to fix it, but wasn't communicating well enough to get that across. And this is where our demon comes in. This is where the movie's demon comes in. I'm tiptoeing around it a bit because I don't want to completely blow everything.
I don't think you should give away the ending, because I think it's worth watching. It's a good film. I definitely enjoyed it. Did they tamper much with what you had written?
Tamper's a weird word, particularly for movies, because for better or worse, movies have become the province of directors. And I kind of think that's... In fact, I'm kind of enjoying what Marvel are doing, because they're producer-led movies. I like Bond movies, they're producer-led movies. But, I like writer-led movies, and it's sad to me that the auteur theory has become a thing that's informed choices that directors make. If somebody says to you, look, in the end... I'm the director, so this is how it's going to be, rather than winning the argument on its merits. That's always a bit sad, but that's how it is. And, the reverse is also true. With a bit of luck, if you're on a TV show, the writer should have a decent claim to how things go down, and the directors will say, well, why haven't I got any power over this? So
So with your movie, the one thing I noticed was when the movie opened, I felt it was very unusual to not see the character's face for such a long period at the beginning of the film. And I wondered if you had written this elongated point of view shot.
Actually, that's the process working right. I'm not going to complain about that, because that should be how it is the director's go, I've got this cool, I really think this will be a great opening for the movie. It sells it on a bigger and more exciting platform than we... The job of screenwriting, professional screenwriting, is hugely pragmatic. It absolutely has to be serving the final film, not the script. Scripts aren't the finished product. Writers who, and it's new writers who haven't done anything, tend to think that they've finished when the script's finished. And it's like, you've just started, because you're not making a script. You're not going to publish that and go, there you go, it's job done. The job is for actors to come in. Now, I come from Red Dwarf more than anything else. And one of the interesting things about Red Dwarf is that when Lister was first conceived, he was conceived as like a 45-year-old burnout. He was going to have a kind of wonky brain. He was going to be, they said, like Reverend Jim in Taxi, you know. Although more modernly, if you were casting it now, you'd have said like a Johnny Vegas type with the frazzled brain and the... And then Craig Charles comes in, and he's 25, and he's not fat. He's a kind of slender, good-looking, young, black, trendy comedian / poet. Well, he's nothing like the Lister they wrote on the page, but he's got so much of the character that would make the show fire, and he had such chemistry with Chris Barry that they go, right, that's what we want. Now, that's writing done right. You cast the part well rather than literal, and then you go and rewrite to suit the part. And I always feel like that's the part that we miss, that we go, you know, the idea that a script is a literal vision as opposed to a really good springboard for achieving an even more interesting vision. So no, I'm not down on that front, on that opening at all, because at least it's dynamic. And I'd written character wakes up wet on beach and frightened and scared. But there's at least some visual pizzazz to doing it with a POV. So
yeah, it's interesting that my suspicion was confirmed.
That's a very interesting observation. I love that as well. I love it when you can watch a movie and start to pull those little parts apart. I criticise on Twitter. I criticise everything on Twitter. I criticise on Twitter quite a lot when people come in and say they've watched a TV show or a movie and they've gone, you can tell the director just doesn't care. And it's like, well, I will put my hand up there, because I don't think you can. I think the difference between I tried really hard and it didn't work and I didn't even bother trying look exactly the same, more or less. Most of the time, you can't assess. You know, somebody talks about dialogue in a movie as like this, you know, that brilliant line. You don't know whose line that even was. There's a chance the actor came up with it on the set. There's a chance the director fed it in. A producer might have suggested it.
You mentioned about, you know, last minute throwing in lines. I was going to ask you about that for shows shot in front of a live audience. Oh, yeah. Are you on set for if a line doesn't work to quickly write a new one?
Not at all. No, it's that's America. To be honest, America has God.
Resources?
Resources, money, and
lots of writers.
It will pay for a dozen writers to be on staff for the entire run of a show. We will pay. If you had 12 episodes and 12 writers, there's a good chance they won't even meet each other until the wrap party. We don't bring them in, we don't keep them around, and we can't afford, because of the way TV is currently structured, we cannot afford to have them all come in and work full-time on one show. And it really hurts TV writing in this country. I'm not really answering your question, I'm off on another rant. But we have a real problem with, you hire a writer to write an episode of something. Well, they can't write on it full time because that one paycheck won't cover them. It won't cover their rent. It won't cover their life. So they have to take 2 other jobs at the same time. So instead of spending 12 weeks concentrating on one TV show, any guest writers on a show, anyone other than the lead writer, is probably off writing 2 other one-off episodes or their own pilot to sell a next thing and blah, blah, blah. And it means that, number one, the writer isn't completely focused on the one show all the time, which it feels like the more you think about something, the better you'll eventually come up with stuff. But also it means that the time given to and also the fact that you're not talking with other writers who are also doing it means that we can have a lurch in tone. And I feel like showrunners in this country have to do more over-the-top rewrites of their core writers. I know Stephen Moffat has to do rewrites on a lot of Doctor Who's. I know Russell did loads of them on his Doctor Who's before that. they have to do it to bring the show into line so that episodes don't feel disparate and written by random people who have completely different takes on the same characters. That shouldn't necessarily happen. And I think if you have a writer's room where for 12 weeks you've heard everyone talk about the same characters, you eventually kind of narrow into a medium. You eventually kind of hammer everything flat.
You gain a hive mind for the room.
And so everyone thinks of the characters broadly in the same way, and you find language quirks and stuff. One of the things that doesn't translate across multiple episodes, and actually America struggles with this too, is that sometimes in the UK, if you've got one writer writing all 6 episodes, a character will find not a catchphrase, but just language quirks, rhythms that they have, that you hear them doing over and over and over again, that no other writer would have given them because they didn't notice. I feel like it's such a surface thing to have put a chart on the wall that says this character uses this language quirk, because then everyone will do it all the damn time.
Like Chandler Bing and the knot.
And that one evolves really naturally. But it's hard to impress that onto a load of writers. But it's even harder to get the writers to find those voices by them all being in different places in different times, and
Yeah.
So no, when it comes to answer the actual question, when it comes to sitcom, I mean, apart from anything else, when it comes to sitcom, I work for showrunner writers, people who are in charge of their shows and have the time. They don't need me to come up with a joke. I'm not really that guy. My thing is story and structure and character. And if that stuff isn't fixed before you've gone to the studio floor, we got bigger problems than whether the jokes work.
You're like an architect as opposed to an interior decorator.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
And do they have other people on set for sitcoms, even just one guy who might punch up a joke?
Depends on the show. Although, God, by the time you get in front of the cameras, if you start introducing new lines, most sitcoms, the cast will freak the hell out. Because they've rehearsed and prepped, and the script was late, because the scripts are always late. They never turn up on time. If the cast have not had enough rehearsal time, but they finally got it down, but it's fragile in their heads, like it's all memorized, but it could break. Coming in with, could you try this gag? What about this thing? What if we do something else? Oh, well done. You get right into their head at just the wrong moment and completely break. You're more likely to break the rhythms than anything else. And you have rehearsed and whatever. But also there is a huge mistake to be made, and I don't work with anybody, I think, who makes this mistake. There is a huge mistake to be made in thinking that because the live studio audience didn't laugh, the joke wasn't funny. Because sometimes the audience's reaction has got nothing to do with the quality of the material. Sometimes they laugh because they're nervous. So sometimes things will get, like a character will walk in and say, "I'm fine this morning," and it will get a laugh. And nothing has happened. But they were all on edge waiting for a joke. And for some reason the delivery of it... Yeah. And the rhythm of it felt like a joke, so they went for the laugh. And that's... Somebody used to tell me, if you tell nonsense in the rhythm of a joke, how many dogs does it change to take a light bulb? 967,000 men with feet. Well, there's nothing funny about that, except that the rhythm of it somehow...
Yeah, it's familiar and sounds like a joke. Yeah.
Actually, that's the worst. I've done that completely wrong. That's a terrible example.
But it made me laugh.
But certainly the rhythms can attract a knee-jerk reaction, because people go, "Oh, I know what that is. It's a joke. I'll laugh." Whoom.
Yeah, that's right.
And also they'll laugh at stuff that they shouldn't laugh at. We had a thing in Red Dwarf once, actually, this was before my time, but I was in the audience for it. Season 8, Lister is talking to a computer that predicts the future. And he's about to destroy her, maybe. And he says to her, "I don't want to believe I'm just an actor saying lines in a script that hasn't been written yet." And the audience laughed, because they've just watched Craig Charles be Craig Charles, and then he switched back to Lister and became an actor saying lines in a script that's just been written. And that's not supposed to get a laugh. That's supposed to... And you either cut that line or you pull the laugh off it, and you have to...
Wow.
And that's... that's an example of... People talk about how the audio on sitcoms is manipulated. And we can talk about that for better or worse, but for sure, you can't argue. An example like that, it would be wrong to have left that laugh on. It would have been weird, because the audience at home go, "Why is that funny?" It's not funny. And it's weird, and it means that that audience is out of sync. And assessing where the live audience on the day is out of sync with where a TV audience would be is part of your job as a producer and a writer-director of that show. So importantly, when a joke dies, if it dies in front of the live audience, you need to reverse a little and look at, is that because it's just not the kind of joke that this audience get? Is it a thinker? Is it one of those jokes that you get, Arrested Development lives on those jokes that are funny just slightly after, because it takes you that beat to get it. Because it's just a little too clever. Great jokes. And it works brilliant for single camera, but sometimes you write one of those jokes for a live audience sitcom and the audience don't laugh. But is that maybe okay? Because the show's got this extra texture now of interesting jokes in between the jokes.
Yeah.
And you can imagine a panicked studio exec somewhere running down, going, that didn't get a laugh, we're going to have to replace that line. Doesn't really happen here.
Well, it's interesting you talk about Arrested Development, which is one of my favourites of all time. And I heard an interview with one of my comedy idols, Mitch Hurwitz, along with Jim Vallerly, of course, who both wrote that on that show. But Mitch Hurwitz said that he went into an executive meeting. He'd been summoned by one of the suits, so to speak. And she actually said, I don't understand why you are repeating this joke.
Oh.
Because she didn't get the concept of all of a callback.
Oh, a callback, a running gag.
And so she wanted him to remove any second appearances of a joke.
See, here's the thing. I do think there's value. Obviously, I'm a script editor on comedies. I believe that feedback is useful. I also believe that you've got to say the thing. If you don't get it, you've got to flag that you don't get it. It might be your ignorance rather than the show being wrong. But the problem is, don't have the power to tell people to take stuff out. Flag it and suggest it. There's a great example in Count Arthur Strong. We did an episode where Count Arthur and Michael go to a hospital, and Arthur starts telling this story about how he once had the role of Doctor 2 in a soap, in a TV show. And he had one line, and the line was, the diagnosis isn't good. I'm afraid. And Michael explains to him, no, you've delivered it wrong. The diagnosis isn't good. I'm afraid. And that's a great joke, right? That's a joke about Arthur not understanding the world, and, that's perfect. Now, the thing is, right towards the end of it, Michael gets caught up in hospital stuff and ends up in a hospital bed, and Arthur ends up being mistaken for a doctor and ends up over a load of trainee doctors leaning over Michael, wondering what's wrong with it. And they ask Arthur to speak, and he says, the diagnosis isn't good. I'm afraid. And the thing is, I think I got a round of applause, but it got a huge laugh. Now, here's the thing. When that script came to me, I said, is it a good idea that he just says literally the same line again? Because we've already heard that him doing that. Maybe he should get the delivery right. Wouldn't that be like a progression and achievement? And I'm there going, look, story growth. He's learned how to say the line right because of Michael. Isn't that brilliant? No, it's not. But on the page, it was hard to tell why that joke sang. And everyone's going to be, well, I saw it on TV and it was so clearly funny and hilarious. And Graham and Steve, who write the show, knew that line worked gangbusters. I didn't. But thank God I don't get to give notes where I say you have to change this, you have to remove it, I insist. Because I don't have that kind of power and shouldn't. What I flagged up was, does this work? And as long as they look at it again and go, no, it completely does, and it's you who's wrong, that's fine. That's fine. And I'm happy to be wrong. You have to know that everything is subjective. As much as I try to be objective about script editing, much as I try to be objective about other people's scripts, you have to comprehend comedy in particular is a very subjective form, and some people are just better at it. And thank God I work for people who are better at it. I mean, I've given, 2,000 notes that got used on that episode and on other episodes and whatever. But sometimes you'll just give the wrong note. You'll just be completely wrong. You won't see why a thing is funny, and it will be gangbusters.
Of course. Well, maybe you probably wouldn't know the director was going to direct him to say it with the heavy intonation.
Well, no,
that
one it was. Yeah, no, that one it wasn't that, but it was. It did. It literally felt like that. It didn't feel like a callback. I mean, I know what a callback is, so I knew it was a callback. But I just didn't feel like it would play particularly well as a callback. It just seemed to sit there, and it didn't at all. It blew the roof off.
You know what this shows, Andrew? You're human.
Yeah, that's it.
Everybody is flawed
and
in
people
one
have
way.
been wondering.
You mentioned about how British writers have to, do double duty on multiple shows and stuff. Can you give an idea on, don't say what you get paid, but, for new writers getting jobs on series, what is the pay like if you get hired to write a script?
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of a good example. I mean, if you get an episode of Doctors, probably. I don't know, because I got an episode of Doctors 15 years ago, but that's an entry point job, right? That's a job where you've submitted drama scripts to the BBC. They've gone, oh, you're pretty good, and they've maybe put you in touch with the production. You've done maybe a trial script for them. So unpaid trial script was how they used to do it. I don't know. It's probably $5,000. It may be less.
And how much time is expected? How much time do they give you to write the script?
The turnaround, there's maybe a month, I guess, but it depends, because sometimes you have a longer lead time because you know what they've planned far enough in advance. Maybe it's 6 or 8 weeks actually, but it varies. I want to be very clear about this. There's no typical example. There's no normal.
Is it negotiated?
Oh, yeah, definitely. But if you're coming from nothing, if you're coming from I've never written anything for telly before, you're basically in no position to argue for anything other than the Writers Guild minimums for what a fee for TV is. And that's fine, because for most places, if it's commissioned, you'll get that minimum, which is fair enough. But the lead times, it varies. Usually, apart from anything else, a script commission for Doctors is, we've decided you're a good enough writer for this show. We know this is going to happen, so we're commissioning you to write something that's definitely going to be made, short of this script being a complete apocalyptic collapse. Most production companies, when they hire you to write a script, it's very likely it was you pitched them a show, they loved the pitch, they loved the ideas, and they went, all right, we will pay you to write a pilot. At which point there's no particular schedule, because there's no broadcast. You haven't got to reach a production deadline or anything like that. So there is, like I say, there's no typical, there's no normal. If it's your thing, if you're trying out, if it's a sample script, if it's for a channel rather than a production company, there's so many fluctuations, I've written on things where we've done rewrite after rewrite after rewrite, and 2 years have gone past, and I've done stuff where if it isn't all turned around and delivered in a couple of months or less, then, everything falls apart.
When you were talking about the canned laughter, I meant to mention I'd read that John Cleese, when he was doing Fawlty Towers, deliberately told the actors to not pause for laughter when they recorded the show, because he said the audience watching on television at home won't be pausing and they won't hear you guys so loud. So he told the actors, talk over the laughter.
That's very interesting. That can be risky, because then the audience didn't hit the TV audience, have got the live audience laughter going on when the next most important line of dialogue is coming up, where it's exposition that you really need, or the next joke doesn't work. So the thing, but I don't know. I think there's a middle ground to be struck. There are definitely, and that's dependent on your style of sitcom as well. I'm not a fan of Mrs. Brown's Boys, but you can't argue with, number one, the ratings, and number two, the success of it, where creatively it knows exactly what it's doing. It says, no, we're playing this right to the back of the room. This is a show.
Yeah.
This is the Mrs. Brown's variety half hour, and we are going to project every line at the back of the room, and we're going to let the laughter roll. And you compare that to a Fawlty Towers, or to Drop the Dead Donkey, which is my particular favourite. Drop the Dead Donkey had such verisimilitude. It played in front of a live studio audience, but it did it in a set that was so tight and enclosed, and filmed like it was tight and enclosed. And they didn't just stop for the laugh. There's a middle ground between letting it roll and hogging it. And as long as you find that middle ground, it can play just truthful enough. Graham Linehan says a smart thing. He said that the live audience laughter on a TV show is not there to tell people at home, oh, this is funny. It's there to tell the cast to be funny. It instructs the cast and the writer, the showmakers, to be funny. Because if they're sat there, if you've written a page without a good joke on it, what the hell is the matter with you? And you can get away with that in a single camera show. You can't get away with that on a multicam, because the audience is going to be sit there dead silent. The flip side of that is that there are times when silence can be really beneficial. Some of the best Red Dwarf moments have been people figuring out the story and going, there's this lovely back to reality is the episode, and the characters wake up and it looks like they've undone the show, because they wake up and they were in virtual reality, and it's like the whole of this show was a virtual reality game. Number one, they had to do the scene twice, because the first time the live audience just didn't react at all. They were so much in shock. Now, that's an important one of don't gauge what the audience is. That's now famously one of the most best known, best loved, and voted top of polls episodes of Red Dwarf. At the time, the audience didn't really go for it, because they were stunned. So they have to do retakes of the scene to get the laughs in there. But even then, that drawing of breath, that intake, I use the example a lot of, there's an episode of Roseanne where Dan and Roseanne have a blazing row in their living room, and things get knocked off of the mantelpiece and stuff, and it's two huge actors, literally and figuratively, having this huge blazing row, and the audience go quiet because they're frightened. I love that. There's nothing louder on the soundtrack in that moment than the audience's silence, because you've been hearing them laugh all the way through, and suddenly they've gone, it adds to the tension of the scene. And I feel like it's things like that we've kind of lost because of I do this rant all the time, but because of things like The Office, and The Office was great, but it led into the single camera boom in sitcom, and that meant that for a while nobody was making multicam sitcoms with a live audience, which means that now we have a generation of directors who've never done it, and a generation of writers who haven't had much chance to write for it, and it means that some of the skills were lost. And it's such a shame, because in the middle of the 90s we had Coupling, which was doing things with split screens and subtitles with a live studio audience, and you had I'm Alan Partridge, which was doing it with a full walled set and a roof on the set, and both of those in their different ways were doing really interesting things with multicam sitcom, and then we stopped making them, and now we make them again, but we make them all with everybody shouting to the back of the room. We do our Mirandas and our Mrs. Brown's Boys and Citizen Kane. There's nothing wrong with any of those shows, but it's only one style of studio audience sitcom, and it's like we've forgotten how to do the other ones. It's one of the reasons Graham's great, because Graham has still got an instinct for the quieter moments and the stranger moments of those things.
I mean, he's one of my, the British counterpart of a Mitch Hurwitz.
Oh.
I absolutely just love his work. What is he like? I mean, as a person to work with?
He's someone who knows his own mind. There's a thing with him he's got like a tuning fork where he can hear if something's out of tune so specifically, for jokes, for rhythms, for beats, for movements, to the point where, honestly, I can't hear the damn difference. You sit in one of his live recordings, and sometimes they will do a lot more takes than you'd expect to need to do, because it's just not tuned in quite right. And I do sit there going, was that different from the last take? But he can hear it. He knows that it wasn't quite there, and now it is. And it's quite the gift he's got.
And is he giving a specific direction, or he's just letting it run through?
No. He's always, my recollection is he's always on the studio floor. So he's not even feeding notes through the floor manager, which is how you would normally do it. He stands on the floor and he goes straight back up to the actors and said, that's great, but what about this? And how about this? And try a new, And that is variations and rhythms and stuff. And usually that's partly due to you never have enough prep time. You never have enough rehearsal time. You've overhauled the script at the last minute because you just realised this is a so much better way to do this story than the one that we currently have, which has had an impact on production and knocked back, and it means, actor rehearsal time, blah, 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 blah.
How much time do actors get generally to rehearse with a director?
You usually do a week. You usually do this live studio audience on the Friday night. So you've had, in theory, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to do rehearsals and pre-records and all of that. And if you're lucky, if you're on a show like the IT Crowd or like Count Arthur, where you are given money for a location, you've done your location stuff a little bit in advance as well.
And what's his personality like, Graham Linehan? Is he pretty relaxed? Is he wound up?
He's a real pro. He's a brilliant instinctual thinker. He's quieter than you might imagine. He's got all the shy nervousness that I think I have, and I start talking to fill the silences sometimes. And on the other hand, he can be incredibly garrulous, and it depends who he's with. And we're not personally very close. I work with him. He's a colleague. Sure. What's quite nice is Graham works very closely with a chap called Richard Bowden, who is his producer and quote-unquote studio director. And it means that there's kind of a co-director thing going on here, where it's Graham's directorial vision, but Richard's technical execution.
Like a first AD on steroids.
Yeah, absolutely. And it means that, because Richard's incredibly together and organised and practical and sensible, and they work so well together. And what it means is that Graham gets to be comfortable and loose with the cast and be... It's not like I spend loads of time in the rehearsal rooms, but when I've sat and watched them rehearsing and prepping and organising, there is particularly on the IT Crowd, they're all comedy writers in their own right. They're all funny people. And every single one of them will challenge the script in the nicest ways. What if, how about, isn't this because, da-da-da. And Graham's unselfish in that regard. He will pull the best ideas out of all of them and turn it into... So it's not quite co-writing, but it swirls into this kind of whirlwind of genius as everyone starts feeding in more stuff and everyone and they won't be creative like that if the room is very strict and organised and regimented.
Right.
You have to be able to chill out. And what's nice about Richard having to do the regimenting so that Graham can be the more creative and pull the best stuff out of them. It's a very unusual kind of method. It's not like any other sitcoms, I should say, because it's very similar on Count Arthur.
It's quite unusual in the UK, isn't it, that the writer is directing it as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways of looking at that. I mean, the truth is with the American system, God, if you were writing on it, you were writing on it up until 10 p.m. the night before rehearsals started, and you're going to be doing rewrites because all the time on the studio floor, blah, 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 blah. To do that for 22 weeks, I can't imagine coming out of the writer's room on week 17 and going, right, I'm also directing this week.
Right.
I mean, it must happen occasionally, but that's the other thing. American sitcoms, so many episodes, there's a turnover of directors. It's not the same director every week. With UK TV, if you do 6, they're all directed by the same person. It's across the board,
right.
You know. Only when you get into bigger series like your Doctor Who's or whatever, where you do 13, where they change up the directors and all that. But for sitcom, yeah, you'd have the same director every week for the 6.
You may or may not know the answer to this. Somewhere along the line in an interview, I saw somebody said that the writing process that Graham Linehan has is he writes a bunch of his best ideas for the episode on index cards, chucks them on the floor so that they're face down, and literally just randomly picks some up, and the ones he picks are what he works into the episode. Is there truth to this?
I honestly, I don't know if that's... I think he's done that. I can't remember ever talking about it. I mean, I've been into it where he's had you can get these sheets of whiteboard, these plastic sheets that with static just stick to the wall and you write. He's filled walls and walls and walls with them.
Wow, that sounds awesome. Can I just say, for adults to write on the walls, that sounds amazing.
I've bought some and I've started doing it myself because it's quite. You feel like you're doing something at least, you know. But I think it would be remiss to suggest that the process is quite that random. But certainly he has, and actually a lot of good comedy people do this. He has a knack for, I know a moment that I want to hit. I know a particular idea. Most of Count Arthur's, you'll notice the A and B plots, they're connected to each other. They're themed and they round into each other. That's not 2 random cards that have been smashed together.
Right.
Everything's kind of a piece. There is a real technique to, I definitely want to hit this set piece. I know this will be funny. If I can get Arthur into a plane thinking that he's taking a driving lesson, but the other person thinks he's giving it, and vice versa, that they're 2 guys both in a plane end up flying when neither of them actually knows properly how to fly, but they both think they're doing what... That's great. But you then work backwards. If you know you're going to do that, you then... And I recommend this to anybody, find targets to aim your writing at. Don't just start with, they're in a coffee shop hanging out and something will probably happen. If you're aiming towards something, best of all, if you can aim towards an ending, but if you can aim even towards a good middle, that's useful. So you get a piece like that and you go, okay, well, then I need... What's Arthur doing at an airfield in the first place? Okay, so we need a personal thing that's going to take him there. Well, Michael took him. Why did Michael take him there? Well, Michael must have taken him there to get him over, maybe get him over something to give as a treat, because you wouldn't take Arthur to an airfield most of the time because you know it would end in disaster. So something really emotional must have. Oh, maybe a break, maybe the loss of a woman. Well, what if and that whole episode starts to build up from behind that one great central first gaggy, funny set piece idea. You see it a lot. Red Dwarf, Doug Naylor's very similar. He will construct good dialogue set pieces and good funny sci-fi actiony set pieces. Great bits of business, and then you look at how to build them in. That's a starting point, because once you've logistically built it together, then it has to feel characterful and all the other things. It has to be more than just a practical exercise. But you start with that practical exercise.
Well, you've been in such a unique position to have worked closely with such great and famous writers, people like Miranda and obviously Graham, and now Michaela Cole, who I think is going to be, can I just predict, a huge, huge, giant star.
Definitely.
This series, Chewing Gum, that started as a comedy blap, which is a little short that Channel 4 made.
Actually, it started as a
play.
Yeah.
That's right. She'd written this play when she was really young called Chewing Gum Dreams Then it got made into the shorts for Comedy Blaps, which secured her a commission for, I guess, a pilot and then
not
a series.
Even a pilot.
Just a series.
It went straight to a series of 6, which is, you can imagine how unlikely. Never written for TV before, except for those little blaps. She'd written more material than just the blaps, and they'd seen all of that. But yeah, such ability and such professionalism. That's the thing about Michaela. It's very easy to talk about how great the final product is, because my God, I mean, the Twitter feed for that show, like you do Red Dwarf, and the Twitter feed for it is always kind of half and half, because there's a load of people, particularly 10 years, 20 years in, there are people who have a very fixed idea of what they want a show to be, and if it isn't specifically that, it's tough to win everybody over. But new Bond films come out, the Twitter response is completely half and half, right? There's no consensus at all. But Chewing Gum, everyone who's watching it is loving it. I see 2 negative comments a week, and everything else is glowing.
It's so funny. I mean, for people in America, the equivalent, she's like the Lena Dunham of the UK.
Yeah.
It's like you've got this one individual who's doing everything. She's acting, she's writing, she's a poet, she's a singer-songwriter.
And she's associate producer on the show, which is not unimportant because she really is across everything. She's across costume, she's across choices of design and of everything. But also it's very hard to fall in line behind her. Like I say, because of her attitude, because of her professionalism, you've never known a writer so young to telly be so switched on to how to plow ahead and make stuff work. She's so dedicated. We will do a day of script editing, which is usually she comes in with an episode, with an idea and a shape and a structure, and then I will come and blow it all up and we'll start again. But we'll keep all the pieces. She's got great ideas for, what if she goes to this job place and she gets high and, I want to do that scene. That'll be really funny. And separately, we've got her trying to get jobs and it doesn't go very well. And you go, well, how do we connect those? And I think it was my suggestion of, well, why doesn't she just be mistaken by one of the white idiots who are around, because she's the one working class black person in the room. Oh, you're probably the drug dealer, so you can get us some stuff, can't you? And at first you go, whoa, that's a horrible assumption. You go, oh, that's a horrible assumption. That says something about that guy,
right.
And she's too daft a character to say no because she thinks it'll get her the job. And suddenly you find pieces getting joined up, same thing. But what's amazing is we'll do that in the room and you get all the structure together. And then she'll pick it up, leave the room, and then she'll go out and write all night, and you'll get a draft the next morning or the next evening or something. She will plough through, hard and far, endless resources of energy.
Wow.
But new drafts come through all the time, and she doesn't fear the rewrite. A lot of writers, you see them ring-fence material. They put a little border around it and say, I'm not touching that, though. That's already perfect. It's never perfect. This is going to always be better.
And she's 27?
Something like that, yeah.
Oh. Let's have a moment of depression. Right.
It's worth saying, though, you find your time creatively as a writer, as a whatever you want to do, as an actor, as a performer. Look at Christoph Waltz was on Graham Norton the other night, and they showed footage of him doing kids' TV in the mid-70s, where he's in the coloured stripy jersey doing, hey, kids, look, I'm the new year. He's got 2 Oscars now.
Wow. I've done kids' TV. There's hope for me yet.
But you find your time. Christoph Waltz at 25 doesn't seem like an interesting actor to me. Christoph Waltz now, terrifyingly interesting.
What's his movies he's in?
What did he do? Django Unchained and
okay.
The other Tarantino. What's the matter with me?
Inglourious Basterds?
Yes, Inglourious Basterds. And he's just done Spectre.
Oh, I think I know the character you mean. Was he the evil Nazi in Inglourious?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he's amazing.
But the thing about it is, you have to allow for the idea that there might just be a time for your talent, and it just isn't quite yet. I'm hemorrhaging towards 40 now. And what I realised was when I came out of university going, I'm going to be a writer. I mean, fine, but you haven't got anything to write about, you idiot. You hid all the way through university. You hid in a corner and didn't, get close to much of anyone or do much of anything. My life kind of started when I got involved with TV production, but that's not something to write about. That's not interesting. So it's only after a lot of time and a lot of pain and a lot of experiences that you go, well, now maybe I've got stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
What is it? Tony Jordan, who wrote on EastEnders, I think was in his 40s when he started writing for EastEnders, and now he's a legend of BBC TV drama, and quite right too. But you find a time and you find a voice. When writers get down on themselves about it, sometimes it's because you weren't any good and you just had optimism. But you're not hurting anybody by keep writing. Go on, maybe, because maybe it's just not yet.
Yeah.
And that's not about other people, although there is other people's taste too. Maybe you are ahead of your time, maybe you're behind the time, maybe the thing that you're writing isn't interesting to anyone right now, but in 15 years it will be.
Right.
All of those things, all of those possibilities about the zeitgeist and timing, but also maybe you're just not fully blossomed yet. And a lot of talent across the board, sometimes they have a bright, fierce glow very early on, you know, that they'll be in their 20s and they'll be amazing and astounding and then everything they do after that, it kind of falls off because they've said everything they've got to say, but now they're just kind of saying it in slower, duller ways. So what if you didn't do your 20s? What if you waited until your 40s to have the fire? Well, then you're great for the whole of your career until you're dead, you know, because you're not going to do as much rubbish.
Right.
I do think it's worth people, because everyone's got hope and aspiration, and I'm sure anyone listening to any conversation that I'm having can only be because they're actually interested in getting into writing and stuff. I've got no gossip. There's no celebrity reason to come and listen to me talking. But for the job, for the role, for writing and script editing and doing TV and doing film, it might just be you haven't found your voice yet, you haven't found your moment yet. And finding your voice is such a vague thing to say to a writer. Go and find your voice. But
yeah, I've heard that a lot with stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
About comics finding their voice.
It's so important, though.
Yeah, it always a little bit to me was one of those foggy ones.
Yeah, and it is. It's so nebulous and it's so true. Because a stand-up comedian who kind of sounds like everybody else, you know, no matter how competently executed, if they leave the room and they don't really remember you, then they don't come to your next gig.
Right.
And the same is true of writing. You know, we can't all be Jimmy McGovern and Russell T Davies. We can't all be the absolute pinnacle bests. But even the workaday writers, there is a thing of, actually, I do have something to say here after all. That was the thing with After Death, actually, was, like I say, this stuff that I'm angry about, religious stuff that I'm angry about, and also sexual politics stuff. I'm so angry about a certain kind of toxic masculinity. So it's very quietly, I hope, a slightly feminist movie.
Well, you've got 4 hot women in it.
Well, they weren't written as hot. I want to be very clear about this. They were just written as people, as women. There is a narrative beat built into the movie about why they look the way they look, but that's sort of me just amortizing the fact that if you're going to make a movie, you're going to hire actors. And if you're actors, you're the kind of person who wants to put their face up in front of the public. And 9 times out of 10, they're more attractive than everybody else. Like, I didn't meet the cast of After Death. I saw their audition tapes and stuff, but I didn't meet the cast of them until we screened it at Fright Fest. And 2 of the girls were there. Oh, my God. I mean, they're so thin and tall and beautiful.
Can I just say that is like everyone in LA?
Well, and that's my... Exactly. And that's the point. I'm a fat guy, right? Even John Goodman or Robbie Coltrane, they're the best kind of fat guy. You know, they're really interesting look. You can't not watch them if they're in the room. They're so charismatic. There is a level of attractiveness and confidence to successful actors because we want to look at them. And with that in mind, if I'm going to write a movie that's got 5 women in it, I already know before if I write, you know, not attractive next to them, they're going to be not attractive for film, not for the real world. So you know that that's going to be a thing. So why not play into that?
That's it for now. We will pick up next week for part 2, where Andrew talks about writers' rules and should they be broken, his own writing hero, and just how does one get into this elusive and highly sought-after world. As always, photos, bonus goodies at thegreyescape.com, including how to enjoy Andrew's scary movie, After Death, where you can find it, how you can see it. This show is brought to you by westcoastlondon.com, so if you want your own one-of-a-kind, hand-painted, original, spray-painted Time Lord shirt, or another unique item inspired by fandom, visit westcoastlondon.com and use coupon code ESCAPE to get 10% off your order. Thank you guys so much for listening, as always. I'm going to catch you next time for part 2 of the Ultimate Hardcore Writers episode on The Grey Escape. And this one's for my Whovians. When things get rough, keep calm and don't blink.